Hey, welcome everybody. In this podcast, we delve into the journey of Queensland multicultural community, exploring the challenges of racism and its prevention. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with individuals, experts, and community leaders who are actively working towards creating an inclusive and anti-racist society. Discover inspiring stories, practical strategies, and initiatives aimed at fostering understanding, empathy, and unity across cultures in Queensland. Let's together build a Queensland that celebrates diversity and stands firmly against racism. Today on the panel, I have Sangeetha, and I've got Moale James and Cosmas. I don't know your surname.
So my surname is Onyemaechi, so it's Cosmas Onyemaechi.
All right, so I'll just let everybody introduce themselves, and we can start from Sangeetha.
Thanks, Rio. Thanks for saying my name correctly as well. My name is Sangeetha Kutty. I am a lecturer in CQU. I'm a sessional staff over there, as well as I work as a researcher at QUT. I'm a data scientist. I am a mother of two children, beautiful girls, and one of them was born here in Australia. The other one was born in New Zealand, and I'm from India, and my husband was born in Malaysia. So we have very good mix of people from different countries of birth. As well as, actually, I have been in Australia for the past 17 years, and it was a beautiful journey with a lot of learnings that we had, and that's me.
Thank you. Moale?
Thank you for having me this morning. Yeah, my name is Moale James. My full name is Moale Antonia Paya James, and I tell you that because I was named after both of my grandmothers. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge them in this too. I come from a small village called Gubba Gubba, which is in Papua New Guinea. So my mother is from Papua New Guinea, and my father is a white Australian man. And I currently live in Brisbane in the Anjan on Yagara and Turrbal country. Thanks.
Welcome. And Cosmas?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. Look, my name is Cosmas Onyemaechi. I'm from Nigeria. I'm actually an engineer, electrical engineer. I'm also a sales rep for the business that I represent here in Australia. I'm married to a Kenyan, and we have two beautiful kids. So now they're a mix of Australian, Kenyan, and Nigeria. So my parents are both Nigerian. So I'm like the first time to come overseas to establish myself here, and finally found myself a Kenyan wife. And so that's how it is for me here in Australia.
I love that we all have this, multicultural experience in our direct personal lives. And today's topic, we're going to be discussing embracing diversity and building an anti-racist Queensland. And how has your personal journey in Queensland been impacted by the diverse cultures and communities present? With all you guys, you already have multiculturalism within your home, which is pretty awesome. And how has it influenced your understanding of the importance of embracing diversity? We'll start from Sangeetha.
Thanks, Rio. It is actually quite an interesting topic because, as I said before, I'm coming from India, and I have lived in Singapore as well as in New Zealand, and then here to Australia. So that is how we have moved. To me, it's like Australia has opened up a lot of opportunities to see other cultures and be part of it as well. Because my husband was born in Malaysia, and then he moved to Brunei, and then to Australia, and then back to Singapore. So his journey was like, so he grew up most of the time in Malaysia and Singapore. So in our family, we have like everyday cuisines. We have food from multiple cultures, as well as we have some traditional cooking as well happening in parallel. So in our family, it's a mix. But what I noticed in Brisbane, especially with the growing number of migrants, we can see a lot of people with different cultures, and they come with beautiful events and celebrations. And my children was a part of the Tamil school because my husband never learned the language, our mother tongue, because he was living overseas, and he didn't have that exposure, unfortunately. But our children studied for 16 years in the language school, where we got exposed to not only our own culture, our own country's people, but also it was Tamil was spoken in Singapore, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and parts of Fiji, and some people from South Africa. So in the language schools, we could actually get that experience, and we could also learn about their culture and how they do. And there is always from there, like you speak the same language, but in different accents, but we actually could get a taste of their country's culture as well. So it was a beautiful journey, and my children, it's quite interesting. In Tamil Nadu, we actually don't eat a particular dish in this way, but they actually got used to that, and they are enjoying a mix of like sweet and the spicy version of the same dish. So it is beautiful to see that. And also the events that we were actually being part of, like Chinese New Year, we wanted to go part of it, as well as the Middle Eastern festival, the Greek festival, especially the Panyari festival. Inspired by it, we went to Greece as well. So it was quite good to see. First, we try the food, and then we actually go to the country as well. So that is how we feel that in Queensland, there is diverse culture, and we can learn from other cultures. Some of the things that we do, like especially for baking, we copy a few tips from Greeks as well. So this is how we have embraced the culture in our family.
Wow, that's really beautiful to hear that your family has that experience in Queensland. Yeah, my experience of experiencing diversity in Queensland has been very different, and I suppose it actually starts before we were even in Queensland for me to be able to understand the difference. So I was born in Darwin in Northern Territory, and in the Northern Territory there's a massive Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population there. So when I was growing up during primary school, I was very close with the First Nations people of Darwin, the Larrakia country, and also the Torres Strait Islanders, because we were so close. And then my family moved to Melbourne, and in Melbourne there's a lot of migrants, a lot of migrants from Europe. So when I was growing up, I had a lot of diverse experiences, like what your children are having at the moment. Like we were going to festivals, and we were going to markets, and we were eating all of these different foods, and through song and dance and art and celebration is where I had my experience of diversity. But then when my family moved to Queensland, this was back almost 15 years ago now, we were in a small country town on the Sunshine Coast, and it was very different. I mean, my family were the only brown family in the town. So, and you know, I'm not very dark, but my family were one of the brownest people there. And so that was a very interesting experience for me to be able to see that difference, even in the states of Australia. And then as I was getting older, I moved into Brisbane, which is where I live now. And my experience of living in Brisbane, and through the work that I do, and the work I do is as a creative producer, I'm working with a lot more diverse people now, and I'm certainly seeing that diversity grow more in the city. I'm not seeing it as much back where my parents are, but yeah, my experiences of diversity have been mostly associated with place, and it's been very different growing up. So I think in some way, at times it's been hard for me and my family to be, you know, sometimes the only brown people in the room, which I'm sure is something that you're all familiar with at some point. But I can see that there is this change that is coming, and it's really exciting to see that, and seeing that there's a lot more migrants and diverse communities coming into Brisbane. So yeah, it's not really an answer to the question, but it is just more of a bit of an observation from the experiences that I've had living in different parts of Australia as well. Yeah, but that's really all I wanted to share on that part.
Okay. You're muted, Cosmas.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, so I think my story will not be complete if I do not mention that I started off in Sydney. So I had never left. You know, I just came straight from Nigeria to Australia, and I went straight to Sydney. So it was a really huge cultural shock for me, because you know, I never saw a lot of different people in one particular place at the same time. So it was really a very big exposure for me. And I think my story starts off in the university which I attended. You know, so I met a lot of diverse community in the university. So that really exposed me to different cultures, different racial groups. And that was how I started assimilating these different, you know, cultures. I became friends with a whole, you know, a lot of people from different backgrounds. And I started learning, you know, eating the foods, especially my friends from the Indian community. I really enjoyed, you know, having their company. And that really, you know, helped me to navigate the different cultures. Then the Sydney, you understand that Sydney is quite really multicultural, really, you know, huge multicultural community. So I moved to Queensland in 2019. So I would say by 2019, when I already moved to Queensland, I was like, you know, maybe 60% aware of the, you know, diversity that we have in Australia. So it was easy for me to navigate the community. Though in Queensland, when I came, it wasn't as, you know, the culture wasn't as inundated as it was in Sydney. But being that you know, I've had that exposure in Sydney, I had that little, you know, like the stepping stones to navigate the system. And for the job that I do, I engage with a lot of people in different fields. So what I do to help myself is I always ask questions because I want to know, how do I address you? How can I, being in your space, how do I, say my good morning to you? How do you take this? So because of that exposure that I've had from being in Sydney, I tend to ask questions to be able to help me navigate these different cultures, to meet people with different, racial backgrounds. And it's really been a very huge learning for me. And one more thing that I would like to say that really helped me so much in understanding the community in Australia is representation. When I came to Australia, I felt like a lot of us were relegated to a certain type of, thing that people were doing. But I also was able to see other people who were in different positions, in different aspects, in different career paths. And it really, gave me that mindset that you can do this, you can be this, you can go there. So these things really opened my eyes and told me, or gave me a different perspective, that you can be whatever you want to be, regardless of this society, regardless of the different diverse community around you. All you need to do is learn how to live together, learn how to respect each other, and you can actually just navigate the system as it is. And that's been a very that has been how I've been surviving in Australia and in Queensland, living in Brisbane.
Thank you all for sharing your journeys. So I'm going to ask you to share a lot in this session. So can you share an experience where you witnessed or took part in efforts to address racism in Queensland, and what outcomes or lessons were learned from that experience?
I'll go. It's just that racism, I would say, I have not experienced in a severe manner, but it has been there in a subtle way. So personally, because as Moale was pointing, it is just that we are of different color and we are coming from different background. So many times I get asked, are you in Indian straight away? Like rather than asking which culture you are from first, and then it's kind of like, it's quite stereotypical, like, okay, you look like Indian, so you are an Indian. So that it starts with that, and asking people with like, say for instance, my name is, I know it is a little bit long, but it's not too long. It's got 3 syllables. It's like, do you have a shorter name? Do you have an English name? Those kind of questions I have faced, but every time they had asked, it's kind of, my response was, my name is Sangeetha. My full name is Sangeetha Kutty. I never retracted. And I also emphasize the same with my children, as well as with my students. Many times students come and say to me that it is just that they don't say it as racial, as an issue, that they feel that they are not part of or included in the society at times. And many of my friends, especially because we had this, there was a refugee issues, and some of the friends used to, from the language school, they used to come and say that they feel that they're not part of it, especially if you say you're Tamil, coming from the Tamil community. It took me a while to even say that I'm an Indian Tamil person, and it is just that it took me a while to even use the word Tamil at sometimes in my conversations. But that is my identity. I can't change. And I tell them, this is your identity. We can't do anything about it. We are part of it. And we come with a very rich culture, very rich heritage. So we need to address that. As well as like when I went to the Ethnic Schools Associations of Queensland, where there were conversations of people from different culture, they did talk about it. So it's better to listen to them, understand what is the root cause, and not saying like, hey, that's fine if this is Australia. But rather than using those kind of words, we usually try to listen to them. What is the root cause of this issue? Why do they feel that? What is the thing that, are they finding it too hard to understand the language? And I have heard, not many times, it's a very few times, why are you not talking in Australian English? And this is what I can, but it is just that I want to talk in the way that I want to talk. So it's just that I tell them, it's like, yes, I can talk, but I don't want to try it on you. I might be too good with it. So sometimes I just make fun of it and I just move on. Sometimes it becomes quite hard. And why do they want it? Possibly they don't understand that. So they need to actually emphasize on, as Cosmos was pointing, like asking questions. So they tend to find it difficult to ask questions, whoever has been impacted or who is actually asking these kind of questions. So asking, like possibly they don't know how to phrase it properly. you would see, like I have seen some diplomats, my friend was saying this morning, like she used to see a lot of diplomats coming in, they will be very fluent in their language, but when it comes to translating their ideas in English, they find it very hard. So they will be having difficulty. So possibly during that time. So yes, I did see a few times, but it was quite subtle, but I had addressed it then and there. I did not carry it with me. I wanted it to be addressed. If I couldn't address, I ensured that I got the support networks, people of similar background. I try to seek their assistance and address that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because just like how you put it, in a very subtle manner, these things come up. And for me, sometimes addressing it, I'll just say, I'll start from this way, like addressing it, I have to understand that if this person is approachable or not, because there are people who can be very aggressive towards you, and you just don't want to be in that situation. You just exit. So I actually just make sure that I understand my environment before engaging. But with the name, I've got that a lot where people, I thought, I mentioned my name is Cosmas, and they're like, hey, can we call you Cosy? Can we give you a nickname? Can we, like, I'm a very happy person. Like I hardly get upset. So I try to, encourage these people. Like, look, my name is Cosmas, and I don't think this name is a very difficult name. You can pronounce the Greek names of, God, Cosmos. You can say that, but you can't say Cosmas, So my name is Cosmas. I politely, redirect them and say, hey, this is how to say my name correctly, and we can go from there. Though I haven't seen racism heavily, like haven't really experienced it as much. And I think that will be attributed to the fact that the community we live in is really, really diverse. So a lot of us come from different backgrounds, and it's hard for me to be, racist towards someone else who is from a different background because I don't know your story that much. So I think that is one of the benefits of having not seen it as heavily as in other places. But I've seen in a train sometimes where people tell you, go back to your country. And again, I make fun of that, like, well, flight is really expensive now. If you could give me the money, I would, but I've been missing my home. I would like to visit home, but you know what I mean? So this is just some interesting ways, just to avoid engaging, too much into that situation. But as much as being, experiencing racism, as much as we could see in different other communities or in different parts of the world, I think Queensland hasn't been, like that for me. I haven't experienced it that heavily. And again, I think it's due to the fact that we are really, there's rich communities in Queensland and everybody respects everybody. That's, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's a really the interesting experiences that you've both had, and the reference that you're making to this subtle racism. One of the other ways that I understand it, and the way that it's kind of been explained to me in my conversations with my family, is that racism in Queensland can also be very sinister. You don't, because sometimes it's so systematic. Some people also don't realise that they're contributing to it, and then some people know exactly what they're doing, and they want to see if you can see it as well. So yeah, there's definitely been experiences I've had where it's been very sinister racism, and like both of you with your names, my name is Moale, and a lot of people can't say that, but yeah, and someone always asks me, oh, do you have a nickname? And I'm like, well, I do, but it's not for you. Just say my name, it's Moale, and I just we just teach them how to say our names. Yeah, and I think like I have experienced racism, and even that in itself, because I'm someone who is so light-skinned, a lot of the racism and discrimination I've experienced is about being a light-skinned Papua New Guinean person, and people saying to me, oh, you're not Papua New Guinean because you're light-skinned, like you're white, you were born in Australia, you've lived in Australia your whole life, you don't have an accent, so you're white, and that is racism as well. This is my community. I know who my community are. I've gone back home regularly. My children will also be Papua New Guinean because I am Papua New Guinean as well. I think one key isn't the right word, but I suppose one recent experience of racism that I had was, as you can see on the video, I have markings on my body. These are cultural markings, and these are markings from my great-grandmothers from our village in Gubba Gubba. And I recently tried to go out to the valley, and I was denied entry because of my face. And from that point, the racism that I experienced in that particular instance of just simply being denied entry because I am carrying cultural markings, which are part of my identity, part of my culture, and therefore racism. Sometimes actually telling people that this was also a racist thing, they go, it's not because you're white. And that was the rules of the house that you were trying to, the nightclub you were trying to get into. So, I mean, that's a very, recent example, but Yeah, in the communities that I live in here, often I am the only brown person here. And there's been a few times where I have seen others experience racism. I can remember a time at uni where I was walking out of the shops and there was a Middle Eastern family having dinner across the road, and there was this guy walking on the same road as me. So I was walking to my car and the other family were on the other side of the road having dinner, young family, and this guy just started abusing them, just screaming at them, go back to where you came from, you don't belong here, having a, just being really rude. And I went up to him and I went, what are you doing? You're disgusting. Go home. No one wants you here. And then, he was all grumpy and walked off. And I went over across the road and I said to the family, I said, I'm so sorry. That was completely inappropriate. I'm so sorry. And they said, no, it's okay. It's okay. I said, no, it's not. It's not okay. You need to feel welcome here. And, that's part of being in Australia, is that people from diverse communities need to be welcomed. And one thing that I always think about is this, this country wasn't ours before we came here. This was the country of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So you, mate, are also a settler, the guy that was having a go. You need to remember that we're all visitors here, and we're all guests, and we need to treat each other with respect, because you haven't been treating this country with respect. But, that's a whole other tangent in and of itself. Yeah, but that's some, those are some different examples, I guess, from experiences I've had. Yeah.
Yeah, that was excellent, Moale. It's kind of like stepping in and talking to people. It's a beautiful step, because it's just that addressing that issue and saying that, as Cosmas was saying, it is kind of like identifying that there is a problem and then addressing it then and there. I love the example that Cosmas was giving. Like, okay, so, like, tickets are quite expensive, so we can always buy that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I had to, because if you don't tell them, they wouldn't understand. It was like
Yes.
really expensive then. I'm like, nah, I would love to, but
actually not in
out,
our
would.
Yeah, it is very expensive, especially during December.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it is quite good to see that, because it also helps us to relate to the whole context as well. So it's kind of like, it's not just our culture. We are seeing it, like, many times I have seen people, like, because my children speak Anglicized Tamil. It's because this is what they learned, and they're learning from Indian teacher, they're learning from Sri Lankan teacher, Singapore. So it's kind of like what they're learning as a language itself is quite Anglicized. But we accept that, because it is just that, yes, you speak Tamil in Anglicized way. That is fine, but that is, you need to carry your language, your culture with you. And many times they say, oh, you don't know the language, and they start talking to you in English. Sorry, guys, they know the language. You have to, yes, you're right, because you need to be identified, though you might be born in the country, and you may be a second generation. Yes, there's a lot of limitations. Thanks. Beautiful points there.
All right. Thank you for sharing. And there's a few good points that I picked up there on, what you guys have learned to do to, what strategies that you've kind of used when you faced those situations. With Moale James, I love the allyship tactic, just, to be able to have that empathy, and just not stand on the side and watch something just happen, which is what is crucial, so that people, because sometimes people have this thing where they want their experiences to, whatever it is they're feeling, to make people think it's a common feeling. For that family, I'm sure, it was, they felt even way better when you did that approach. And yeah, that's pretty much great. We just, as a community, when injustices are being done, it's not going out to fight or anything, but it's just being able to be that person and to be that ally at that time, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, and then moving on to the next one, we've got, in your view, what are some of the key steps individuals and communities can take to actively build an anti-racist Queensland? Any takers?
Well, I'll just go. Like you've already mentioned, Vonam, yourself. You've mentioned allyship and advocacy, which is really good. Like people need to ally themselves within the communities that promote diversity and inclusion. We also need to think about, like, community engagements where people can organize events. Like for example, when we got kind of, like, my friends invited me for the Diwali, which is really interesting. I attended. My colleagues invited me for the Chinese New Year events, amazing events. So these are experiences that when you attend them, when you engage, it exposes you to different cultures and different how things are done. Then you understand this person even more on a deeper level and be able to respect them on that that side. Another thing is and I mentioned earlier in our conversation about representation. And if I want to use example, we recently had the first Indigenous judge, which was announced recently. So that's one big example for the people, especially for young girls in that community, to see that they can rise up to this level in their career, in their life, in whatever they're doing. And that was another thing that really helped me in my own career. Because when I came to Australia, I almost wanted to just give up chasing career, because I thought like I can never get there until I see people who were in positions and like doing things. I'm like, oh, okay. If I really work hard, I can be here. If I really put in the effort and do the right things, I can be at this level in my life. And I'm seeing the results now. So I think representation, the allyship and advocacy, community engagement, in workplaces and school engagements to, for schools to include programs that encourage them, that foster diversity and inclusion in their academic curriculum to help the students in school to learn other people's culture. Because if we don't get it right sometime at that stage, we can teach all this at home, but when the kids go out, they mingle with different people from different cultures. So if the schools and the workplaces don't put up, events that respect other people's culture to show that these people are respected and valued, it may not be able to, they may leave that school without learning anything about other people's culture. So I think workplace and school engagement is really important to help develop the young ones, as well as ourselves in our offices, to learn more about other people's culture.
Yeah, it's that phrase, you can't be what you can't see.
Exactly.
Yeah, I often think of that phrase a lot. I mean, I'm the eldest in my family, so I have a great cultural responsibility to be an example for the kids that are coming up after me. And that phrase, "you can't be what you can't see," has been drilled into me my entire life. Yeah, I think one thing that I also find is that a lot of this work is often put on the shoulders of people who are diverse, because we're the ones that are experiencing that racism in communities. And sometimes it's not always a thing that you want to do, because you can get so tired. You can be exhausted having to always be the advocate, having to always be the ally, always be the teacher. And that's something that I've learned recently, is that it can be really exhausting. But coming together with your community is something that gives you great strength as well. And I totally agree with what you're saying about, community engagement is so important. I was really lucky when I was in school. Both my parents are educators, and it was really important for them that their children were raised in communities that their children had a strength to be able to speak about their own identity and culture when going into communities where they were not represented. So my mum would often come into my school and she would do a cultural talk of some kind. Like we'd make coconut scones with kids, or we'd do weaving, or she would come in and tell stories of our markings. And it starts really young, like these conversations with children who are just innocent and wanting to ask lots of questions about things they don't understand or things that they don't see. So there's lots of things that you can do. Like I'm not a parent, but I can see the things that my parents have done to support me and my understanding of culture, and it is exposure to diversity as well. I think I'd be preaching to the choir to say that that's what we should be doing. I think that, there's kind of 2 points that I've discovered. Is there is that exposure as a child, and there is this thing now where you can't be what you can't see, and often it's people like us going into spaces for the first time and having to be that advocate and that representation for our community too. There's so many things. And I think one thing that I wanted to say about this point is that I used to say it was ignorance that stops people from learning. I think there are still elements of that, but I also think that there is a level of arrogance as well, an arrogance of, I'm feeling threatened, I'm worried about my own community not being represented. If you were the stereotypical white Australian who has always had their way and always had their voice heard, when that starts getting threatened, you start getting anxious, and then you start spouting racism, and then you start spouting hate and saying, go back to where you came from, you're not welcome here, because suddenly there's all these brown people around you and you weren't catching up. You weren't listening when they were trying to talk to you and, trying to bring you into this diversity. So, I mean, it's a massive conversation, but that's some thoughts there.
Very good points, Moale and Cosmas. It's just that, to me, I feel that it is in different levels. So first, personal. So we have to accept that we are just a molecule in this whole universe. And then there are plenty of other molecules. Like if we go to that level of granularity and see us that we are part of this universe, that actually that ego and the, like I am the big person could actually help us to understand that, nah, I'm not the controller. It is just that there are plenty of people like me and they will be able to manage. So this is the first level of like being self-conscious. And then as always, one of my friends used to say before he took to go, we were asking, why are you playing golf? And then he said that because I used to dislike it before I hate it, I better learn it. And now I'm enjoying it. So first I better start learning about other people. And then before I completely dislike certain things or create some hatred. So that it starts with being self-aware. The second step is thinking about the people. This our own family. Everything starts from home. So first educating people are different, and then creating that awareness, we can actually focus. The third level is like our neighbors as well as our community. So are we interacting with our neighbors? Some of them may not be even talking to others. Like when we first came in, there was this I said, we are going to have a Christmas party in the neighborhood. And they said they have been here for nearly 25 years and they have never met each other. But they're such a beautiful, wonderful people individually, but then when they came together, now we all distribute a lot of vegetables, plants, and everything goes around. Okay, please watch out for my house. And there was some break-ins. We are all together. So this is how we can actually keep going. And then to the communities and going to we participate in other community events as well as not only just attending it, being part of it. So they also wanted our cultural performances there to showcase that we are all included. Though it is their main event, still they wanted us to perform. So many times it is kind of like we can grow, and it is just the abundance. If you see a lot of it and you just feel like, okay, this is normal. So diversity could be actually become quite normal, and they don't see the difference anymore. They don't see that one person, if there is one person who is going to a club and then 10 of us will let us all go. What do you think about it? So 10 of us wearing bindis and saris, we can go there and say, okay, why are we denied access? So this kind of things will actually help them to understand it's okay to wear bindi and sari to go to a club or pub. That is fine. So I actually go everywhere with my bindi and sari, especially. And people have asked me this question. And I said, yes, I'm an Australian and this is my culture. And I'd like to be like this because during the week I wear formals. And during the weekends, I do it, as well as Cosmos was pointing beautifully with the schools. I think recently my daughter's schools have got it, and I've seen plenty of other schools talking about Multicultural Day and bringing in games, cultures, food. But my simplest thing is try different food. They're very tasty. Every culture has got the best. Or watch Netflix series or SBS food shows. You will be like, wow, they've got so much to learn. Yes, I think you just learn from the other cultures. And yes, that is the way to, yes, as Moale was saying, it's not only ignorance, there's also a lot of elements. I don't want to learn. I know everything. That kind of attitude should change when we start with. Each individual has to also reflect. And yes, everyone should make a move.
Okay. I really love the points you guys put forward with Moale, with you can't be what you can't see, the representation point that was brought forward by Cosmas. And Sangeetha, with the self-awareness, I find that to be very important because sometimes, the more in tune we are with who we are, we love ourselves, we love who we are and where we're from, and we are proud of that. When the external factors come, when the comments and the disrespect come, at least you always remember your core, the individual that you are. You know that it's not you, it's them. I find that to be very important. And the other point that Moale gave was about, the burden of being, the burden in advocacy, the burden in basically in also slightly in representation. With this one, I would slightly say I've seen quite a few social media breakdowns where people have had to carry all this weight because they have to behave a certain way because they are carrying either, the black flag, because if I behave like this, they're going to say that black people do this. So they tend not to be who they are because they don't want to be, they feel the burden that everything is on them to be the representation for their people.
Yeah.
I found that to be very important as well. And thank you for touching on the education factor, which was the next stage we were going to, but you guys really addressed that very well. and love the fact that your mom did that, Moale. It's pretty amazing, especially when your core people can go above and beyond to make sure that you feel accepted in the spaces that you are. It's pretty amazing, and I wish that more parents can take this on, and just be that support for their children. Yes, it's one thing to say that there is issues. Sometimes we can expect institutions to help out, but as Sangeetha said, interacting with neighbors and being like Moale's parents, and just being the person who just is the first step to that interaction. And as we aim to create an anti-racist Queensland, what do you see as the most significant challenges that need to be addressed, and how can we work towards together to overcome them?
Beautiful points, and it is a very interesting question. Significant challenges, especially I feel that though we may be talking about improving individual communities, but when it comes to media, many times there is like a stereotypical it's the comments which we have to actually put an end to it. Saying like Chinese restaurant is having this, specifically say what is the name of that restaurant. This particular restaurant has got that. The headlines news has to change. So this is where we have to the government has to emphasize on policies, not targeting any specific communities or ethnic groups, rather saying specifically who is, because if you're saying like this is it, everyone in that community, whoever is doing really well, will be impacted. So say the person's name, say that. So this is one of the biggest challenge that I see that needs to be addressed. As well as when there is a comment about some ethnic race, some politician talking about it, yes, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be discussed rather than it. You can't just hold on to it just because they are politicians. They've got the authority or the power. That is one step that we have to, because when we first moved to Queensland, some of them asked this question, are you sure you're going to Queensland and not to any other state? This was a shocking thing for us, because they were saying the racism may be quite high. It was then we said it could be, but we are there to create a change, and we are there to be part of this society, and we are ready for it. So there are some stereotypes which will be still a challenge until we address it in openly, and this is not just the lower level, it has to go to the higher level of media, government, and the politicians, and we have to have clear statements saying that this cannot be said in, yes, there is freedom of speech, but also what is your problem, address it specifically. If there is a problem with the restaurant, say this name's restaurant at this location has got this problem, precise, and not just like general information. We are going into the specifics, and go for Twitter where you can't go more than a few words. So very precise, just 2 lines we want statements like that.
Yeah, and I really agree with you, Sangeetha. That's a very important and very vital point you just made. And we're even looking at it. I'm actually looking at it on the Facebook page, community Facebook page level, where we on the community pages of our different estates where we live. And something would happen if it's from like a Black person or from a different community. They just put it there, and like an African people did this. So sometimes when I read those comments, I feel like was I involved in this crime, or like what's going on this page? So I feel like they need to be able to break certain things down to the level where it's pointing to the direction of the person who's done this, put their name out, or it's from here. So we don't generalize and make everybody look bad all at once, because that's really important. And that brings me to my own point to answer your question. I think political engagement, like it's very important in trying to address this issue, where we have to vote for leaders who support the fighting racism and fostering a community for diverse people. So we need to engage leaders who fight for racism, who fight for diversity, who are there to make sure that we live in an egalitarian society.
Yeah, both of your points, Sangeetha and Cosmas, I'll echo those points, as well as reiterating what I said before. Obviously, representation is important. That helps combat racism. Education combats racism. But we're living in a digital world at the moment. And, I have my own social media. One thing that I noticed, to come back to that example that I used about being denied entry into a nightclub, after that experience, I was on the news for a small period of time. And the comments that were coming through on those media posts were they were disgusting. I mean, I was getting threats left, right, and center on the street, online. And I think one thing I'm realizing more and more is that we actually need to be having more conversations about, are the comments that we're allowing on social media, are they actually helpful? Are they keeping people safe? Because there are people online that will, you know, keyboard warriors that will live online, and they'll see a comment on a post and it'll be just a tunnel for them, this echo chamber of, oh my gosh, there's people that think like me, there's people that think the same way. Yes, this is wrong, these people shouldn't be here. And that's so dangerous, that there is just these pools of comments where people feel heard, and they're not being addressed. And I know that there's a great push now for media organizations in comment sections to be hiding comments, to be deleting these, to be monitoring. And I think that needs to happen across the board. It needs to be a focus, because that is contributing to racism. That is racism, the comments that you get online. And yeah, like your point as well, when media are reporting, I mean, I'm media trained. I have a Bachelor of Communications with a major in journalism. I was trained to sensationalize stories. What is the hook? And if the hook is, this community has done this, that is contributing to the racism that people are experiencing. And one thing that I learned very quickly when I was studying journalism is, I don't want to be a journalist. I did a 3-year degree and I didn't want to be a journalist, because I could not see how it was ethical, that there were some things that we were being taught to do that just were straight up wrong. Like, you know, that some of the headlines, having to get a hook to get people to read a story, is just contributing to this discrimination that people are experiencing. Yeah, so I think that there's again, it's another responsibility that we as diverse people have, is to hold these media organizations accountable. And I can see that that's happening, where sometimes some media organizations will focus on just one aspect of that person, and often it's their cultural background. And people will call them out and say, you can't do that, you know what this does to this community. Do not create this stereotype, because it's not helpful, it's really harmful. Yeah, so to both your points, the media is one thing that needs to be addressed, and as well as our online interactions, social interactions, social comments, because we have this whole generation of people who grew up in a digital world, who have only ever known technology and have only ever known social media. So that is another world that we're having to navigate, and we do need to have, I don't want to say the word controls, because people get scared when you use that word, but there needs to be more conversation and monitoring of, you know, of those interactions. Yeah. That's another thing to add there.
That's a very interesting point, Moale. It's just that as part of our group, we were doing filtering of comments, abusive comments. And one of the projects we did was actually to remove these kind of comments and then only display them. So I think we have to go for a grant for this kind of projects, where we need this kind of, because people don't want to see those abusive comments and then get more offended than actually their actual experience. The actual experience is already hurting them a lot. And then it is, the situation is like adding fuel to the fire, and then it becomes quite aggressive. And then it is stirring another set of conversation, making it mandatory that people with this kind of things cannot enter. So this is not, this is like, it has to stop. So the policies should be there for the mass media as well as for the
that was certainly my experience. You know, this one event that happened of being denied entry, like, that in comparison to the hate that I received online, was, I would much rather go and try and be denied entry again than go through that media storm that I went through, because it was very eye-opening to be on the other side of it and see, like, getting death threats online, people trying to figure out where I lived. And that's why I'll always advocate that we need to be holding media responsible for monitoring these comments. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys for sharing. And on the moderation part, I think that's pretty key. But if things go as far as, you know, threats and trying to find addresses in your home and things like that, that shouldn't just be pegged as it's a social media thing. It should be taken seriously, because that world is as real as the world that we are living in right now. And beyond moderation, you can't just walk around threatening people. No. There should be consequences, equal consequences, as you would say, you know, I want to kill you to someone on the street. There should be no exception, because the fact that you are not a robot, you are a human being using a computer. It's the same thing. That is my input on that. With that, it's a wrap, and I will ask, do you guys have anything else to say?
Look, I would say, I would like to say thank you for having me on this panel to discuss this very touchy topic. It's really important that we do talk about it. But I remember the first time I saw the topic when you sent it, I had to remove myself from, a point of anger. Like I don't want to feel this type of feeling, to put myself in a different feeling so that I'm able to think, in a very open manner, in a very, comprehensive way, so I'm able to put out what I'm thinking. But it's important that we have these discussions, and I want to say thank you to the other panelists here, Sangeetha and Moale James. Sorry if I didn't get it right, but yeah, Moale James, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation we used, and it's really nice to learn a lot from everybody here today.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Yeah, thank you for starting the conversation, and hopefully it's a conversation that keeps happening. And yeah, thank you, Cosmas and Sangeetha.
Thank you so much, Riel, for initiating this conversation, and thanks for moving the times to suit our requirements, because I really wanted to talk about this thing, but unfortunately I couldn't do it in the previous session. Thank you so much. It's beautiful. And I want to finish off with something that I learned from when I was in school. It's a saying called as Yadamure Yavarum Kelir. In our language, it was written 2,000 years back. Every place is your town, and everyone is your relative. This has been written 2,000 years back, and still we are talking about this. And yes, as Moale pointed out, this conversation should actually keep going every year until we find an answer to all the questions that people are facing. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And it was beautiful to hear each of your opinions, as well as your stories was so inspiring, and we can take a lot of things from here and helping the community as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day, guys.
Thank you, you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.